Appearance on Dion's Daily Dose does not imply endorsement from or by any candidate or guest. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed by Dion Bergeron or Dion's Daily Dose are his own and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of any guest. Material and information presented is for general information purposes only. The Dion's Daily Dose name in all forms and abbreviations are the property of its owners, and its use does not imply endorsement of or opposition to any specific organization, product, or service. If you'd like to support the show, please visit our Patreon at patreon.com/Dion's Daily Dose.
All right. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Dion's Daily Dose. Today is Sunday, October 18th. Over halfway through October, ladies and gentlemen. We're right there, aren't we? So just to let everybody know what's going on, Rachel Kessler will be joining us. Here's what happened. She's running a little time, but it is not her fault. I'm not in love with this camera. I think I'm going to go back to what I was using before, but that's all right. So I'm going to tell you what's going on. Move that up. There. She has to download another browser. I was not aware, but StreamYard, which is the program that I use, does not work with Safari. She is a Mac person, and that's what Macs use is Safari. But she is downloading another browser real quick. Initially, it was like, she's like, I detest Google. I said, I don't blame you. What do we think about the lighting here? I'm gonna be honest. I'm not in love with it. I might turn the overhead back on. Anyway, trying to try different things so that I can maybe see if this camera can be utilized. It would be really good. It's really good if it's farther away, but unfortunately, my desk is positioned. It's kind of right up there. But she will be joining us. In the meantime, while we're waiting on her, I don't know if you think it's much better with the overhead. Well, now I got to do this. Okay. My wife just ran in here and turned the light on without saying anything. She just ran in and turned it on. Anyway, let's try that. Personally, I think it makes me look a little red. There, maybe that'll be better. Anyway, I'm not in love with the shadows, but she will be here. Just give it a few minutes. She has to download. She decided on Firefox. We were gonna do. I was talking to her about. It works with Google Chrome. It works with. Now Jack's saying it's too bright. Kill the overhead. She just turned it on. I'm trying to turn it back off. What about that? Is it better? I moved the camera a little bit and turned it a little brighter. Jack said, kill the overhead. Anyway, and then we can talk about term limits. Now, I'm going to say this before we get started. This is not an endorsement by or for them for me or me for them or anything like that. This is a conversation. Personally, I believe very strongly in term limits. Okay. Jack says lessen the light a little bit. I appreciate you letting me know this. Let's turn this down just a little bit. How's that better? Yeah, if I could get this camera like farther away, and personally I think it'd be better, but I'm a big fan of term limits. I think once you have served the people for a little while, if you want to continue to be in politics, move on, right? Go to a different position. When you are in the same position, whether it be state legislator, whether it be mayor, there's a reason that the president, let's see, where you're at sitting was best. Closer without that overhead is good. Okay. All right. So like right here. So there's a reason that the president has term limits. By the way, just so you know, I'm not talking to myself. There it is. There she is. She just jumped in. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to introduce you to Rachel Kessler. Now, those of you who may not know who she is the Indiana State Director for U.S. Term Limits. Big deal, really big deal, and I'm glad she took the time to come on here. We're going to talk about term limits, what they are, why we don't have them yet, even though most people want to have them. Bringing her in right now. There we go.
Dion. Hi, everybody.
Hi, are you able to hear me okay?
Yeah, you can hear me okay? Yeah.
Good deal. Yep, perfect. All right, let's see. I'm going to do something real quick. Lose the background. There we go. All right. So thank you for taking the time to join us. I'm going to actually play with this a little bit because there we go. This camera, I'm not in love with it. I'm going to actually move it a little bit, and then I'm going to put it back to where it was. There we go. All right. I'm still trying to get everything set. I was using my phone for my camera, and that worked. There we go. That worked okay, but I needed something more dedicated because when I tried to do my videos, it's because it was all wireless, but that's a whole other thing. So everybody agrees that I've talked to that are pretty much what everybody wants, the exception being people who are enjoying the benefits of being in office for 30, 40 years. If you don't mind, tell us what U.S. Term Limits is about and how it's coming.
Okay. Sure. First of all, thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it. Do you hear that echo? Is that on your end?
Yeah, that's probably here. I'm going to turn that. It's on my end. For some reason, my headphone jack on my computer quit working, and I haven't been able to get it fixed yet. So hopefully this better. Go ahead and try.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I mean, it didn't bother me. I just didn't know if it was bugging you. So yeah, again, thank you for inviting me on. I appreciate it. I'm the Indiana State Director for U.S. Term Limits. We are a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization. Actually been around since the 90s. And the simple stated goal of our organization is term limits. Term limits from top to bottom across the board, from Congress to state legislatures to the judiciary to school boards. Our executive director recently was working on an effort successfully in Florida to get term limits passed on the school board down there. So term limits for everybody. So the way that I actually, met Dion, and the reason we're here right now, and the reason I'm talking to everyone in Indiana, is that Congress is sort of like the, Hydra. This is like the head that we have to chop off. The biggest problem, the biggest issue, the most detached from the people, the most corruption, the further away from the people. Obviously, the harder it is for people to have a direct effect on power, and the more power they have as well under our system, even though it's upside down from how it was, Congress has the larger portion of regulating everything that we do every day. So that's why we're focusing on Congress right now. So our biggest initiative that 99% of our effort is dedicated towards, and why I'm here today, is to get term limits on Congress. So that's the goal. That's what we're trying to do. And Dion's right. We have been polling on this for 25 years. The numbers are consistently over 80% of voters, basically, give or take, and only 9% actually are against it. So you can decide what those other people are or are not thinking if they don't have a position on the issue, but that's where it comes out. And it's actually also bipartisan. And, I know it sounds corny, but in this day and age, I mean, how many things do people agree on? Republican support is higher, over 90%, but that, term limits for Congress is actually in the Republican Party platform nationally. It's been there since the mid-90s. That's a separate issue. We can discuss why it hasn't happened. But Democrat support is over 75% as well. And I find that in speaking to legislators that tends to be pretty reflective of, as far, that's how voters feel with legislators. I tend to find that too. A little bit more support on the Republican side, but pretty good support overall.
Good. So, yeah. So you would say that in general, it's something that transcends party lines. It isn't something that just one side wants. These days, it's hard to find an issue that like both sides or even the middle can say, yeah, that's a good idea. You either have people that are, oh, and they belong to this side or that side or whatever. What do you think the regular voter can do to press? Because I don't know of that many people. I don't know what's going on. I don't know if you're seeing it, but the screen is like kind of going black for a second, and our video feeds on yours, there was a little bit of lag. I don't know what the internet's like with where you're at, but here mine's generally pretty stable. I don't know if it's just a bad night or brother doesn't want this conversation out there. I'm kidding. I don't think that. I'm just messing around. But what can the average voter do that can help? Because, like you say, in consistent polling, over 80% of people believe in term limits for our politicians up and down the board. What can the average person do?
Okay. That seems like a simple question, but it requires a little bit of history. And the question before that, right, is if all these voters support it, why don't we have it yet, right? I mean, why has it not happened? Well, the little bit of history, and it's important because you can't answer the question of what we can do without understanding what we can't do. So back in the 1990s, again, for those of us who are, I'm sorry about my cat. There will always be cats in the background.
I locked mine out, which is the only reason he is not on the back of my chair right now.
So in the 1990s, if those of you who remember the contract with America, the big deal, big part of the reason why the Republicans had control of Congress during the Clinton administration, was one of the big things that was in the contract with America was term limits for Congress. That was expressly put in there. Now, shockingly, it never happened. Why did it never happen? Well, we can speculate what the real reason is, but the stated reason was they could never agree on a number. So, we couldn't get enough. We all supported, of course, but we couldn't agree on a number, and so we couldn't get it. We couldn't get it done. Okay, fine. So basically, what our organization did in cooperation with 23 states is we had term limits put on the ballot and passed in 23 states, whereas those states would limit their own delegation. So Missouri passed term limits. Their legislature passed term limits on the Missouri congressional delegation, their senators and their congresspeople. That was done in almost half the states. And it was going really well until a legislator or hope to be legislator, I don't remember if he was running or if he was seated, sued us. And it went all the way to the Supreme Court. So in 1995, his case is called USTL, which is U.S. term limits. It's our organization versus Thornton. If anybody wants to look it up, let me see. I wrote down the 514 U.S. 779, 1995. And in that case, it was a 5-4 decision. And it was held that state-imposed individual term limits on their own delegations are unconstitutional. The reasoning behind that was that the Constitution sets out the qualifications for office to serve for Congress. You have to be 30 years old. You have to be a citizen, I think, for like 9 years. You have to live in the state that you're serving in once your term starts. And it was interpreted by the majority that putting on a term limit is, in essence, adding an additional qualification. That qualification would be you have not already exceeded the term limit, right? That was how the majority interpreted it. Therefore said, if you want to change the requirements for running for Congress, you can only do it through a constitutional amendment because you're technically adding something to the Constitution, So that was the majority. The minority, and Justice Thomas actually said this is not a qualification. This action, and this is relevant actually, if we get to it, about some potential for this maybe being looked at again in the future based on some recent rulings, which would be great for us. Justice Thomas's argument and the minority's argument was no, this falls under the state's power on Article 2, Section 4 of the power of the states to regulate the time, place, and manner of elections. That basically it's a matter of like deciding whether someone's name should appear on the ballot or not. They're not disqualified under the Constitution, but if a state has a term limit, they can therefore, under their power to regulate elections, not allow that person to be put on the ballot. They're not disqualified under the Constitution, but they're not put on there. But again, 5-4. Only 2 of the justices that wrote that opinion are still there now. And just as a side note, this very recent case, some of you who are court watchers about electors, I think it was like, I don't know how to pronounce, Schifolo versus Washington. It was a case of about whether electors from the 2016 election have to vote for the party that they pledged, the person that they pledged to vote for. Whether the states could force their electors to vote the way that the states is supposed to vote. Basically, can an elector say, I don't care that, that this state wants Hillary Clinton, I'm going to put my votes towards Bernie Sanders. And that case was decided using that justification, and it was unanimous, actually, that absolutely the states can control and mandate their electors to vote for who they should vote for, because they have the power to regulate the time, place, and manner, and they use manner. So it's a little interesting. It's kind of like a little nerdy thing, but for those of us that do this for a living, it's very exciting. The potential that maybe that will be overturned at some point in the future. It takes a lot to get to the court, but that was a big problem, and I hear this a lot on our Indiana term limits page. Which, if any of you are not, please follow it. You'll see that Dion on there because he signed our pledge, which we're very happy to have him on board. Is that I get people saying, put it on the ballot, put it on the ballot. Well, we can't do that because of the Supreme Court decision. Is that clear? Any follow-ups on that? Okay, good.
Paul wants to say good evening.
Yeah, hi. So that's where we are. So we have to pass a constitutional amendment. And then we get to the question, what can we do? Okay, well, the way that we passed all the previous constitutional amendments has been Congress has proposed an amendment, and 2/3 of each house have to vote for it, and then it gets sent to the states for ratification. And most people, including me 5 years ago, thought that was the only way to do it, even though I went to a pretty good law school. I don't know how I missed the second half of Article 5 of the Constitution, which actually sets an alternative method for a constitutional amendment to be proposed. And that is that 2/3 of the states apply to have what's called a convention of states. They then get together, they propose an amendment just like Congress would, and then it has to be sent out to the states to be ratified. So since the chances that Congress are going to pass an amendment to put term limits on themselves is something approaching 0, if not 0, we are going to need to do this other route. So we need 34 states to pass resolution saying we want to have this convention of states for the sole purpose of proposing a term limits amendment. I know that was a very long answer, but that's where we need you. That's where people get involved. That's why I asked Dion to sign our pledge, and we were happy that he did. We need state legislators to pass these resolutions in 34 states, and Indiana is the one that I'm working on, and hopefully going to be on there and going to be up this session.
A lot of people, like you said, either believe it should be something that can just be voted in, or how do I do this? Mm-hmm. So basically, it's going to require state legislators, to get together to amend our precious Constitution. And a lot of times when you bring that up, people start to get a little scared. They get a little afraid about, well, what does this mean? If we can get together, you and I had this conversation, if people can get together to amend the Constitution, then that means they can do all kinds of bad stuff. They can take away our Second Amendment. They can do this, they can do that. And there are organizations that are actually putting out, just so everyone's aware, they are putting out misinformation and disinformation, and they are actually sending surveys to candidates. And in these surveys, it says, do you affirm that you party to any Article 5 meetings because of the danger of, destroying and all this other stuff? It's a fear tactic. And I'll admit, I was like, when I first read, I'm like, ooh, that sounds bad. What can, isn't that a concern? And I talked to Rachel about it, and she shared some very, very good articles with me. They're available if you look for them. But just kind of to summarize, if you would, can you let people know why that's not a thing? Why,
Yeah.
if we get together, to amend the Constitution, why it cannot go farther than the single issue?
Mm-hmm. That's it. Very good. I'm glad that you brought that up. Yeah, there are groups, and they have various intentions. Some I will grant are pure and actually believe this. If you go into detail, and I'd be happy to, you guys, anyone listening can message me on the U.S. Term Limits, Facebook page. I could show you examples that a lot of them are dishonest. They have some personal motives why they're going after this. A lot of them are fundraising off of this issue too, which is a little bit shady. But yeah, first thing, I mean, there's a million reasons, but start with the simplest. First of all, the Convention of States cannot change the Constitution, can't amend the Constitution. It cannot do nothing but propose an amendment. So they're already lying if they say that this convention can change the Constitution or get rid of this convention. The only thing they can do is come out with a proposed amendment, which is the same thing that would come out of Congress. So why is that more scary than what, Congress could tomorrow? I mean, listen, we've all been around long enough. They could very easily, with a temporary majority, if the temporary 2/3, they've been trying to get rid of the Second Amendment. They've been trying to get rid of, there's a lot of things that Congress can do. And is that scary in itself? I mean, do people get so afraid at the prospect that Congress is going to change the Constitution? And so why would it be more scary for the states to do it? So that's the first place where I don't understand, because the two parts of Article 5 are exactly parallel as far as how it works after that. So it's only proposal. Then 38 states have to ratify it. So, okay, let's say that the delegates at the convention get nuts and decide to try to take away, I don't know, the 14th Amendment or something crazy like that. Is that going to get ratified by 38 states? If something is so popular that it's going to be ratified by 38 states, then it's not going to be something you're going to be afraid of, or it would be something that would happen anyway. So that's the sort of simple answer. But the more complex, but I think the stronger answer, because there will be people that'll say, oh, but what if it's not, it needs to be like airtight, right? You got to tell me it can't happen. I can think of like a million scenarios. Sometimes I talk to legislators and say, okay, like all the delegates got out, and like some delegate from, I'm not going to say a state, depends on whether I'm talking to someone on the left or the right, drops acid in like everybody's drink, and they're all like crazy, and they start hallucinating and decide to get rid of like the First Amendment or whatever, Okay, fine. Let's say that happens. Well, this is a more airtight and kind of a legal argument. So the way that it works is that the state legislatures are the ones that are applying for this. And it's the state legislators that are acting in the convention, but they can't go there. You can't send 150 from each state. That's impossible. Too many people. So the way that they are going to actually operate is that each state is going to appoint delegates to represent the legislature at the convention. Now, those delegates were given a commission, and their commission is pursuant to what the state application was. So Indiana, our resolution is going to say, we want an application for Convention of States on term limits only. So those delegates will be instructed, you are instructed to vote this way on term limits. And those state legislators will get together and decide how many term limits does Indiana think is the right number. And it'll have to be a range, right? Because they'll be back and forth. And so they'll be given instructions. You can vote for up to 5, but no more than 7 or something like that. And that's it. That's all they're given to do. So those delegates, and this happens in every state, if they go to the convention and if they propose an amendment on a different subject, it's just not valid. It's just void. It's basic agency law. It's the example I gave Dion, which I give to a lot of other people. If you hire a real estate agent and you tell them, I give you the authority to go to that house down the street that we looked at yesterday and make an offer on my behalf for $200,000. And your real estate agent goes and does that and then makes an offer on your behalf for 5 other houses. And then those people from the 4 other houses come to try to sue you, saying, you said you were going to buy our house. You say, that crazy person did not have the authority to make an offer on my behalf. Their only authority was what I gave them. And the court would throw it right out. It's not even like one of those things that's questionable. This has gone bad. This is from like English common law stuff, basic agency principles. And even to make, if that wasn't even enough, and I don't think I even mentioned this to Dion, but this is good stuff if you have people who are, concerned. In Indiana, in 2013, I think it was in response to some calls for like a balanced budget Article 5 convention, balanced budget amendment, because that's been kind of in the air. We don't have that here. Actually, now Vice President Pence signed an act that came out of the Senate called SEA, Senate Enrolled Act 224. Is it 224? 224. And basically it was passed for this express purpose. It makes express this principle, which I think is unnecessary. I advise you to look it up. It basically says if there is ever a convention of states, and if Indiana ever is part of a convention of states, these are the rules for the delegates, that the delegates have to take an oath to the Constitution and to follow the instructions of the legislature, that the legislature has to pass a resolution giving clear rules to tell these delegates what they can and cannot do, and that any vote that these delegates take outside of the scope of the convention, so beyond term limits, is void. Plus, if they even try to do it, they can be recalled, and it's a felony. And the best part, even if all of the delegates from Indiana decide to try to do something crazy, it makes the entire application for convention of states void, and Indiana is pulled out of it, and it's just as if we weren't even ever there. So
there are just a ton of things that are in place already to keep people from going rogue. That's basically the concern. And like you said, there are people that are fundraising off of that concept. There are people that are fear mongering and putting it out there. Oh my goodness, if this happens. But the thing to take away, really, Paul said, is there's a lot of freezing on the video, but I think in general people can get the gist. Basically, it's okay. Calm down, take a deep breath. Even if you truly want term limits, I know I do. If you truly do out there, look it up. U.S. term limits is the termlimits.com. Is that, yeah, that's you guys, right?
Termlimits.com. Yeah.
I'm gonna drop that link real quick. Learn about it, but the thing to take away, I believe, is there are already lots of rules in place. I think I personally love the realtor example because I'm an agent. I went through the training, I learned it all, but even as a regular person, when you go to buy or sell a house and you have a realtor, you know that they can't just go do that. They can't just go and put offers on a bunch of houses because there are rules and laws that apply. So this is the same thing. There are a lot more rules and a lot more laws, but what it boils down to is it's okay. It's not something that can be a runaway type of situation. As a matter of fact, there are articles dating all the way to, articles and papers that date all the way back to the writing of the Constitution and the inclusion of the Bill of Rights that address this very thing. So if you are that concerned about it, if you're that worried that maybe these people will get together and, like you said, maybe drop a bunch of acid or have some funny stuff and decide, you know what, we're going to wipe the whole thing out. It's not possible. It's just not possible. And Pence, you said, even went a step further and delineated all these other rules. So in Indiana, minimum, it's not going to happen. So my next question to you, after everyone kind of realizes all that and can take a deep breath, because I'll admit, look, when I was all for Article 5, I had learned about it. There's this big push for an Article 5 convention to introduce, the whole purpose was to introduce term limits. That's it, nothing else. And I start getting all this mail about and pop-up ads and emails and just all this stuff that was like, you don't understand, these people are going to fundamentally change everything, they're going to destroy us all. And I started reading it and I'm like, oh wow, this sounds really bad, this doesn't sound good at all. So once, I'm trying to adjust my light here, I don't think that's wonderful, but once you understand that there are a lot more checks and balances in place than there are even in our federal government. There are more checks and balances on this process than anywhere else, I would say, in the law. Then the next, kind of go to the next step. I would say, and look, let me be clear, this is not, I didn't ask her on here so she could say, yes, Dion signed this, vote for Dion. I asked her here because this is something that matters to most of us. If we can get term limits as a thing, if we can get it passed, if we can get people on board and get these legislators, because we know, like you said exactly, they're not going to do it themselves. It's been out there for many, many, many years. They've had plenty of opportunities to make this happen without us as citizens forcing the issue. They have not. Obviously, it's going to take more than just them saying, oh, yeah, we got you next election. Oh, yeah, we got you next election. It's going to require real activity. Who can we turn to? Go to termlimits.com, but who else can we kind of follow and see what's going on? Is there a particular social media site that you would recommend that we can keep track, see what the progress is and whether it's going to happen? Because I think it does matter to a lot of people.
Yeah, and you're speaking in Indiana specifically? Or
Yes.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So yeah, the Indiana term limits is our Facebook page. I administer that page. So I am the state director, currently the only actual employee of the organization working here. We have some volunteers helping. But don't let the curly hair, fool you. I'm a steamroller, and I'm from New York, so underestimating me.
There you go.
Like people, Anyway, but yeah, so that's where information is posted there with all of every time we get a pledge signer. I recently posted a status update on all candidates and legislators who've signed our pledge, so that voters if you haven't voted yet. And you want to check that out, you can see that on there. That is also where, things are obviously very election focused right now, obviously. But I hope to do some more work on there and give legislative progress. I can tell you right now, I'm cautiously optimistic. If it was not for the virus situation, I would be a hair more than cautiously optimistic, but that's going to be the biggest barrier, not only to actually getting this done, but also to knowing how close we are. It's just an access issue. This is just the reality of it. Going to the State House and kind of hanging around and wandering to people's offices and hoping they're there doesn't work now. The legislature has made, arrangements. They're going to be in different buildings. The public's not going to be allowed in the room. So it's an access issue. I will tell you that the Senate is probably where I would hope that we would be starting. I'm finding pretty strong support there. I think that we have at this point 10 absolute definite confirmed seats, regardless of what happens with the election. And the party seems to be is involved. The Republican Party is involved. Again, we're a nonpartisan organization. I'm not here because I don't endorse Dion. I always want to promote everybody who signs our pledge, because That's what we do. It's voter education. But we live in a super majority Republican state. So, that's the reality. I'm happy to work with both parties. But I've been working a little more closely with the GOP on the Republican side in the Senate. And so, again, don't know yet, haven't gotten leadership on board, but it's looking like about, at this point to have 10 definite votes. You need 26, obviously. In the House, it's looking like it's close to 20. So which would make sense, about double. So it's still, I look at the list and I'm like, oh, come on. But, there's still a lot of, the number of definite of no's is like maybe 4 or 5 total. There are a few people in there who say I don't support term limits. Term limit elections or term limits, all the arguments we get. So to that end, kind of the way that you can help is you can contact your legislators. This is what it is. This is grassroots. It's important. There will be a time, and there may be a time where gathering together, term limits day is in February. Sometimes we try to get people together at the State House just to show kind of, that the people want this. But right now, the way I see it is that focusing on the people that we can get commitments for, focusing on getting a commitment to a yes vote. We have a pledge that we ask legislators and candidates to sign. There are some people who are just not going to talk to me. However, they will speak to a constituent. I have a senator who I have never gotten him to answer the phone, never gotten him to respond to an email. A constituent sent him an email and he got back to him in less than 24 hours. And so, with his position on the issue. So, yes. And so on our website, on our term limits Facebook page, there's instructions about how you can look up your legislators and then how to get their information. We need your state senator and your state rep. Additionally, if you know somebody, unlike in Congress, these people live in the community, even if it's not in your district, if you know somebody or somebody's son who might be working on his campaign, someone like that, or that could be helpful as well. It's really a matter of access. And the reality is that with most of these legislators, the people I haven't been able to get in touch with, it's not like out of malice or out of disinterest. It's just that there's a lot of things going on, and we're not. They know who we are now. They know who I am at this point. They all know who I am. But the issue is, with the millions of things getting piled up and all the people that want them to sign pledges and worrying about their families and worrying about their business and their health and worrying about the session. And it's hard to make it a priority for them. And so they need to hear from their constituents. That's the way that it'll be a priority. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And I personally believe that a lot of people underestimate the value of talking directly to your legislator and telling them what's important to you. In the example of term limits, communicate with them, whether it's via Facebook, whether it's sending them. I'm going to tell you, though, a lot of these people, especially your old, been around a while people, and I'm not going to mention any names, but they don't handle their Facebook. They have a friend or a family member that watches it for them. A lot of these people, you're not going to get in touch with them that way. You can leave a message, that's fine. But your best bet in their office and leaving a message, those they get. Send them an email, those they get. Let them know what's important to you. If term limits matter to you, and personally, like I said before, they really matter to me because to me, it's a symptom of self-enrichment. The length of time that these people are in office and we watch their net worth increase and increase and increase, and their districts go down and down and down. They're not working for the people, they're working for themselves. So I'm going to ask this because I'm curious about the answer too, but I didn't want to bring it up. Walter asks if Mark Leyva, who is running for Congress for the 1st District of Indiana, it should be Leyva, if he has signed the pledge.
I would have to check. I don't believe so. I don't recognize the name, but I would have to look at that.
I do know that I've heard him speak before about how he's in favor of it, so it shouldn't be an issue to get his signature on that. Just kind of FYI.
We have. I'm in the 5th district, and as you may know, this is the one that everybody's really worried about. Yes. So I spent most of my time, on working on that in the last several months. We had, I think, probably 6 of the 15 candidates that were running signed our pledge. Of the 2 that are left, only one of them has. So that was the focus. We weren't really, the other races were not considered, as competitive for us to put the effort into it. But we have a congressional pledge, which is different than what we asked the state legislators to sign, because remember, they're going to do it when they're in Congress. So I'll have to look. It doesn't sound familiar unless he signed it a long time ago. I don't know, but he may not have been approached. And that, that sort of, So, although I do have, speaking of Congress, actually, because we do have resolutions in Congress, because we're not giving up on that idea that, one of the other things that may happen, which has happened in the past with other amendments, once the states start getting close to 34 states, they get nervous because Congress doesn't want the states to realize, wait a minute, we can do this too. They don't want that. So there's also the possibility that at some point, that they'll start to say, well, they're going to put worse restrictions on us than we would put on ourselves. So we're going to do it ourselves. So we do have active resolutions in both houses of Congress, and we actually have both Senator Braun and Senator Young are signers of our congressional pledge and co-sponsors of our pledge in the U.S. Senate. And Indiana is only one of 3 states where both senators have signed that pledge. So we're kind of like on the map with term limits, which is why my position is that there's no excuse for our legislature to not pass this this resolution.
I agree. I agree. That I believe that really needs to happen. And just out of curiosity, let's say that you are able to get this done, right? There are a lot of people that I'm trying to think of how to word this. There are a lot of places that by making something happen, they put themselves out of business, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're pushing for term limits and it happens, then what? Do you give up? Do you it's happened, so let's disband? Or do you move on to something else? Do you focus on more of a state level? Just
the organization in general, or are you talking about? Or?
What's the organization's focus? If it was to not suddenly, because none of this stuff happens suddenly, but we get it through the get it put on the map this year, make it start to happen. Obviously, we know it's going to take a little time, but we get it pushed through there. And term limits are a thing. Now what for U.S. term limits?
Well, it will take several years to get to the 34 states, first of all. Then there's the process of actually the convention. And remember, we're the ones that started this. We're going to be behind that. So the next step is going to be involved with helping the states pass their actual, what Indiana has already done, as far as the rules for the convention. There are going to be meetings. There'll probably be mock conventions to figure out what, how this is going to work. And then kind of advisory capacity. There will potentially be some rescind efforts, because these groups will start to try to undo some of them, and we'll need to support them. So until there is a proposed amendment until the convention actually happens, an amendment comes out, there's going to be then the legal challenges to it. So I don't see it as like, we get to 34 states and we're done. Like, it's going to be a process. I mean, it's going to be a huge, and just to kind of as an aside, because some of the people listening might know this, I don't want it to seem like we're oblivious to it. Indiana actually has already passed an Article 5 resolution. This process already took place in Indiana in 2016. Some of you may be familiar with the Convention of States organization. I was actually a volunteer for them before I came over here. Part of the reason I came over here is because I personally did not believe that it was going to ever get to 34 states, the Convention of States resolution. Convention of States resolution is a fundamentally conservative platform. It has 3 pieces. And the third piece is term limits for all federal officials, including, so theoretically, we've done this. So first of all, it shouldn't be that hard to do it here because we already did it. But the reason that we're doing this, why do we have to do this again? If we already passed it, is just because it's an issue of like, when we have to get to 34 states, the issue is like whether, and remember, we're going to be challenged by all the people you're getting emails from, but also by all the special interests and the lobbyists and the whatever, we have to have 34 applications that are the same pretty much for them to be counted together. And so we're going to have ones that say Convention of States, we want to do A, B, and C is term limits for all officials. And then we have a bunch that say we only want term limits on Congress. And there's going to be, we can't guarantee that those are going to all be added together. So we have to make sure. And the reason that, and again, we support as organization and personally support Convention of States. We work with them. I have some volunteers contacting people in Indiana that I worked with in Convention of States, but because it's so much more bipartisan that they struggle in the purple and blue states, and we need to be able to get 34 states. And that kind of goes to the issue, like you're saying, Dia, the fear of like, oh my gosh, the convention is something crazy. We can't even to get 34 states to pass something, it has to be substantially, like a plurality of everyone has to agree on it, or it's not, they're never even going to pass the resolution. So that's kind of just like as an aside, if it comes up, Indiana's already done this. So unfortunately, I have had some legislators, it's very upsetting since that was in 2016, who have said to me, I voted for that, but I no longer am sure I believe in term limits. So just 4 years more of being in the legislature has already made them squishy, is the word we like to use, on term limits. So yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I understand. And that's something that I've actually heard from, and this isn't local to Indiana. This is across. It's odd to me how people's minds change once they're in there, they'll run on, oh, we need this and we need that. I believe strongly in this and I believe strongly in that. And then once they're in legislature, all of a sudden, all of these strongly held opinions they've had seem, or at the very least, get much duller with the nearly as, oh, we have to make sure we do this. It's more of a, well, if it hits my desk. Mm-hmm. I'd love to know personally. I'd love to know where the switch happened and what happened. But if I get elected, I'm definitely going to let you guys know about the secret meeting that they call you into, because there has to be one where all of a sudden. And Walter, all the more reason for term limits. Yep. Because once people get into office, their ideas change, their beliefs change. I don't know. We can chalk it up to a lot of things, but it would only be assumptions at this point. The one thing that I do know for sure is that the longer someone is in office, the less connected. That's been my experience all throughout, and it doesn't matter what office, it doesn't matter how big or small, from the top to the bottom. It seems like the longer someone is in office, the less likely they are to actually understand when you contact.
Yeah, definitely agree. Another thing too, kind of bring up, this issue, which is something it's been helpful. The process, the fact that we have to do this Article 5 thing, which is obviously a burden in a lot of ways because of all this, concern about, first of all, taking so long and having to get 34 states and then having all these naysayers and the fear mongers. But the plus side of it is that when I get asked the question, how many terms are you asking about? We actually don't take a position on terms. In the congressional bill, we had to put the terms in because that's just one step, right? Congress is there's a bill in both houses that says it actually is a very low number because we use the number that polls the best, but the number is 2 terms for Senate, so that's 12 years, and 3 terms for House, which is 6 years. A lot of people, including almost all legislators, freak out when they hear those numbers. But the good news is, on the state level, they can vote for, support this resolution, and I tell them, if you think there should be any limit, even if it's 10 terms, if you think it's any limit, you should support this. The people who are going to be deciding on the right number are not voters. And in some cases, that's better because they don't really know what, again, I'm just playing devil's advocate. They don't really understand what's needed. I hear this all the time. It takes 2 years before you know where the bathroom is. And I'm like, I don't think the American people should be paying salary for 2 years. If you don't know where the bathroom is, then, you should be like, that's ridiculous, right? You work for us. I mean, have you guys ever been in a job where you got 2 years of we'll give you 2 years. You don't have to do any work just to get to know where things are. All these arguments. Right. They can, and I often hear a lot too, people say, oh, they put term limits on the Michigan State House and they're too short and no one knows where anything is and it's a mess. Okay, fine. I'm not going to get into that argument with you. You don't need to get into that argument with legislators. The question is there a point where it becomes too much? And I've never heard anybody say that they think that if they look at the current Congress and you look at a hearing or you look at a vote and you pick out the people, and this is not an age issue because there are people who come in there later in life, the people who've been there for 30, 40 years, they're reading off of a piece of paper that they didn't write. They clearly had a staff write for them. They're not the ones that are coming up with the new ideas, the good ideas. And, they're not the ones that are, making change. And they're not the ones that are, responsive, and they don't have to be. They have a 94% chance of reelection. I mean, I think it went up to 98% in 2016 of them, 98%. So once they make it through their second election, they have to, we know, I was going to say they could do a lot. I mean, they could be under indictment, they could be and still get reelected. It's bad.
It's insane. It really is. It's absolutely insane. Some of these people that, and both parties, I'm not gonna single out any party. There's good on the left and there's bad on the left. There's good on the right and bad on the right. What I've seen though is I've seen articles about people who were currently under investigation and indictment who the election bid. That blows my mind. It absolutely blows my mind that we are so ingrained and it's up and down the ballot. It isn't any, particular position. We're seeing that A, name recognition, and B, well, they haven't destroyed anything, so we might as well leave them in there. That's the level of resignation that a lot of people really feel when they go into that voting booth. And it's like, if the name doesn't strike them as they made this huge mistake, then incumbent is fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's the name recognition. It's the whole incumbency advantage is more than that. I mean, the money, if it's even things you don't necessarily think about. I mean, access to the press, access to, to the infrastructure of the fundraising and the people, usually the party,
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, obviously, Dion would know about this at the state level, but at the federal level, I mean, it's multiplied by a zillion. I mean, you can walk your district. I see all the candidates, posting on Facebook about how they're not door knocking and stuff. Like, you can't do that in a congressional district. You can't do that in a Senate district. It's a whole state. So,
right.
There's no chance. And obviously it happens. I mean, there are those, but, and this is kind of a point too, that you mentioned about the different parties. It's interesting to me that I find that some of the reasons why people that are on the left or the right support term limits tend to be different. And a lot of times on the left, that is sort of the argument, the reason they support it. It's and we all want this, but it's access and money. It's the idea about having more representative, and this should be true for all of us. The fact that, if you want to run for Congress now, and I know because I went to law school with people like this that were 20 years old and they were already planning everything they were going to do because they were setting up to be able to run for Congress, that, connections, money, it tends to be, I sometimes joke, I'm like replacing one person with another version of the same person, so you do get a choice in a primary, but it's really just the lighter version of that same person. And that's because, of the barriers. If you don't have connections, if you don't have, to get into the party and to get favored. And so I think a lot of the reasons why it increases access, more open elections. I mean, the 5th district is a perfect example. I mean, 15, 16 candidates. I mean, that's crazy. I'm sure all those people wanted to run 2 years ago, 4 years ago, 6 years ago, but they weren't going to ever going to have a chance against Susan Brooks. It was just not even an option. Their name would never even get out there. Why take the time? So it's more open seats. And there's been research that shows that in states that have term limits, that there's been increased minority and women participation in actually running for office. So that's a good thing.
I believe that because regardless of where you sit on the political spectrum, many of us believe, well, I could do a better job than them. And the unfortunate thing is that in many cases, right, you could absolutely do a better job than the person that is currently sitting in office for a variety of reasons. But let's face it, when it comes time and you're looking at this election, how many of you think, I should run for this? Pass your mind for a moment. But the reality of it is that running for office is hard. It is a lot of work, but it also costs a lot of money. And those people that are in it for the long haul, that are, 20, 30 plus years, there's no way you're going to beat them. They have access to the money. They have access, just like you said, the party support, to all this stuff. For Indiana's 1st congressional district, there were 20 candidates. 20. Why? Because Pete Visclosky announced his retirement. All of these people were wanting to run for office. Put their name on the ballot? Were they all good choices? No, but that doesn't matter. It really doesn't, in my opinion. The more people that are on the ballot, the more people have to do their research, which I recommend no matter what. Look into the people that are running for office up and down the ballot, locally, state level, all of that. Learn about the people, whoever it is. Learn as much as you can about them. Look at the things that they post. Look at the things that they say, and make your decision based on being informed, not just because you recognize a name. And that's one of the things I believe that term limits will do, is cut down on just the name recognition vote. And also, the most important part of it, keep them from getting rich off of the access. It isn't about the salary. People go back and forth on how much $174,000 a year is for Congress. $174,000 a year isn't going to make you a multimillionaire. Unless you're really good at investing and you've been there a very long time. $174,000 is not It's more than I make by all means. It's more than
most average person.
Good money. Don't get me wrong. Yeah, it's really good money, but it isn't the paycheck that they run for. I was told it costs $5 million to win a congressional seat. $5 million when you only get paid $174,000 a year. You do the math. You're not going to make that in that 2 years unless you're building your influence. You're building your what you hand out. It's not about the paycheck. And that's what term limits, I think, are going to cut down on.
And the other thing too, which is something we don't really always talk about because we focus more on the people who are there for 30 years, but we don't focus on the people who aren't interested in being there for 30 years. We don't focus on people who say, I want to serve, but I want to serve my country, which is how it used to be. I mean, back I think up until probably I don't remember what year it was, but for quite many number of years after, in Congress, there was no one in Congress that served more than 8 years voluntarily. They followed Washington's example of leaving, voluntarily. But that was, that there are people, we're missing out on that whole group of people who say, I think I could do something. I have something to offer, but I don't want to live in Washington for 30 years. I don't want to. And because of the system, because the way it's set up with the seniority, you can't do anything. I don't know if any of you watched the HBO show documentary, The Swamp. I recommend it. It's a little bit difficult to watch if you are politically on the right, because it's biased on the left, just like everything is on TV, whether you're left or right. I think everyone knows that, but it's following these freshmen congressmen and they, part of what they have to do, which I didn't know in their first years, they have to go and make calls to pay back the money that the party gave to get them elected. That's part why they say, oh, they need 2 years. No, they're not learning where the bathroom is. They're working for the party to make up the money. And so and also with the seniority, 20, it's the people, I think they recently it's something like 20 something years is the average number of years before you get a chairmanship in some of this. I mean, the chairs have an average of 27 years of service. I think that was back in the 90s. They checked that. So if we get rid of term limits, gets rid of that, right? There's no more I want to serve, but because I'm just the first or second term person, I don't get on any committees. I don't get any votes. I don't get to do anything interesting. Nobody will listen to me. I'm not invited to the to the press conferences. And so those people are not. So even if you have the interest and you're willing to raise the money, or you have a message that people would be willing to give money to help you get elected, well, you have to think, well, if I'm going to do this, it's only going to start paying off for me. And I don't mean in money, but in influence and really having a voice after 10 years. And maybe I don't want to do it for 10 years. Maybe I want to come back to my community and give back to my community. So it also, I think, as far as opportunities, the idea that you can go in for 2, 4, 6 years and actually have a voice and not be treated as sort of the junior person who has to wait till they earn it, that would also help as well.
Right. Absolutely. Look, unless, and Walter Fairs brought up a good point, unless your name is Omar or AOC, we're not going to get into the politics of it, but I am going to say there's a reason that the media has latched on to certain personalities, both from the left and the right. And it's because it drives up views, which then in turn is used by the party to generate, whether it's revenue or scare tactics by the other party or whatever. But what it comes down to, Walter, is you're absolutely right. Other than a tiny fraction of people, who can you name that's a freshman in Congress? I mean, other than the really scary people for the right or the really scary people for the left, you can't, because they're ignored.
Ted Cruz was the person that everybody, on the left was, everyone who knew who Ted Cruz was in his first term as a senator. He was that one that everybody knew on the right.
Right. There's always that person that the media latches onto and utilizes for their purposes. But it comes down to, you're absolutely correct, because even if, and this was one of the things that I faced when I put my name in for 1st District Congress, was even if I do win the primary and I do win the election, what am I honestly going to be able to accomplish? Once I'm there, I can try, and I had every intention of trying. But once I'm in there, what's the chances that you're going to be on any committees, that you're going to listen to, that you're going to have any of the ears of the people who have been there 10, 15, 20 years when you actually want to make change, when you're the one who is actually reading the bill rather than having staff members do it and tell you what they say, which we've seen from people on TV. That's in there? I thought you read the bill, dude. We're being fed things. But what it comes down to is every single one of us can be the change that we want, but we have to take responsibility for ourselves. And the first way to do that is taking responsibility of your vote. Learn who's on your ballot. Learn if they support term limits. If they don't support term limits and it's something you believe strongly in, vote for their opponent. Because look, there are certain things that are really, really important, in my opinion. Term limits are one of them. And until we can get term limits, sometimes it might involve electing someone from the other political party long enough for a couple of years to get term limits done and then replace them with someone who is willing to do what is important to you. Whatever that is. If term limits is way up there, for example, pro-life legislation or pro-choice for those on the left, your priorities are, find people who align with those priorities and learn who's on your ballot, I guess is the summary. I want to thank you very, very much for joining me. I appreciate your time. I know everyone watching appreciates it too. Is there anything else you'd like to say to people?
Just to add to something that you were just saying too. Term limits. We're here for term limits, but this whole Article 5 thing has the other side of it too, which is if you are somebody who has concerns about other issues, on the left, Citizens United, campaign finance, on the right, concerns about, strengthening the Second Amendment, right to life. There are issues that, because of the way that the courts have ruled, can only be addressed with a constitutional amendment, because once the court strikes down the law, that's the only thing that comes over a Supreme Court. So unless, rather than waiting for the court, we've all been sitting for weeks, no matter what side you're on, with the fact that we are it's insane, the fact that everything goes so crazy with one Supreme Court justice. It shouldn't have been that way. So the issue is that this Article 5 process is the way that the states, which tend to be more representative of what the people actually think, can do this. So maybe term limits is not a silver bullet. It certainly doesn't solve every problem, but it starts the process, not only on the issue of getting the corruption out of Washington and making politicians more accountable, but also potentially starts the process of letting the people, through their state representatives who are accessible, I can get them on the phone, to be able to actually make these more serious policy changes on constitutional issues. So it's just to keep that in mind. Otherwise, thanks so much for inviting me. And I'm happy to chat with anybody. Again, the U.S. Term limits is our main website. So there's a U.S. Term Limits Facebook page as well, which is sort of all the national stuff. But Indiana Term Limits is the one with our all the Indiana specific stuff. And I'm the person that administers that. So you can feel free to message me. My number's on there as well. If you know anybody who you think is, has connections with their legislators, or just wants to help out and volunteer, come down to the State House, I'd be thrilled to have any help that's available. So thanks so much for listening. I appreciate it.
There you go. I'm glad you added that. There's more that you can do if this is something you're passionate about, not just term limits, but like you mentioned, there are many, many things that can only solve by an Article 5 of some sort. Personally, strengthening the Second Amendment in such a way that it goes back to the way that it was originally intended by the framers is something that I am passionate about. But you may have different beliefs. It doesn't matter. What's important is to get on those beliefs and utilize them in order to help. And one of the ways you can help, go to, let's see, I just had it. There it is, termlimits.com, or visit on Facebook. It is Indiana Term Limits on Facebook, and they can use all the help that they can get. Volunteers, absolutely. Go to the State House, talk to the legislators. If it's something that, go through the list of legislators that have signed, or candidates that have signed term limit pledges. If the person that is your legislator or candidate has not signed it, pick up the phone, email them, hit them up on social media, do all of it. Until they do it, look, until we start to hold these elected officials and candidates accountable for their actions, they're going to continue to do whatever they want. And that's what it comes down to. So I want to thank you very much again for coming on. And people are saying, like Walter just said, he's informed now and he's going to be making some phone calls with friends. So it's
keep me updated. Just keep me updated if anyone who's listening, on the Indiana term limits page, or you can just message me on Facebook. Again, my number is on the term limits Facebook page. Feel free to give me a call if you have any specific information, or email me. There's a petition on our website as well where you can check off if you want to volunteer and specifically what you want to do, but there's no need to do that. Whatever's more comfortable for you. And just FYI too, I understand I was a volunteer for Convention of States for 4 years, and I respect people, you can be very clear about what you're interested in, what you're not. I promise not to bug you and ask you to do things that you said you didn't want to feel comfortable doing. So.
Oh yeah, there are those organizations that if you tell them you want to help, all of a sudden they're going to be bombarding you and asking you. I don't think that term limits is one of them, as she just said. So thank you very much, and everybody, thank you for joining me. I'm gonna pull you off of the stream real quick. I'll just be on for a minute or two more to wrap up. And again, thank you for joining us. I learned a lot. I'm sure everybody else that was watching has. And remember, people sign up at US Term Limits, which it's actually on Facebook. Oh, wrong one. .com/Indiana Term Limits, or just look it up as the search for Facebook. You know how to work it. And looking for, there it is. And make it something that you care about. If it is something that you care about, something I care about, I can't tell you what matters for you. Only you can do that. But what I can tell you is that the ones who are doing it for the right reasons, the people that are running because they actually want change, they want to know what the people who live there really want. They want to know if you're for term limits. They can read all the polls in the world. We lost so much faith in polls in 2016. Like, polls are just, okay, it says this, but what's the reality? The reality is that anyone, whether they're in office or just running for office, respond to constituents. They respond when people contact them and tell them, hey, whether it's my street needs to be repaved, or whether it's, hey, term limits needs to be reality, let's work on this. Different things have different weight, but the more people that contact them, the more they're likely to listen. And that's just the reality. It is what it is. I'm going to tell you, for those of you sitting around waiting for your legislator to call you and say, hey, how do you feel about this? It's not going to happen. I can attest to that. I've lived in Michigan City for most of my life, and I have yet to have a single politician call me. There's just one. How do you feel about term limits? Is that something that you want? Use your voice, use your computer, email, phone call, whatever, if it's something that matters to you. And I will tell you that if elected, I will be absolutely pushing for term limits, something that I think needs to happen. So without further ado, we're over an hour now. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining me. I truly appreciate it. Find out more about me at Dion for Indiana, dionbergeron.com. I look forward to serving you if elected. God bless you. God bless Indiana, and God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
If you'd like to support the show, please visit our Patreon at patreon.com/Dion's Daily Dose. This has been Dion's Daily Dose, hosted by Dion Bergeron. Executive producers, Sean Holgram and Michael Beebe. Copyright 2020. Dion's Daily Dose, all rights reserved.